All right, so block, pause. Hey folks, I'm just getting my act together. We'll start here at the top of the hour. My act together. We'll start here at the top. Great. All right, that's good. Okay. I love my new blackout blinds. It really helps me control the light in here. So that's good. All right, so I'm gonna do this. Oh, I know what I'm gonna do. Okay, so got that over here too. Good. All right. One other thing before 1 o'clock is yes, no, messages. All right, good. Okay, cool. All right, hey folks, it's Jeff Salzman here. Welcome to the Daily Evolver Live, which is turning out to be more of the Daily Evolver rough draft as I sort of stumble my way through here. I guess last Tuesday, I did a whole original show, and my tech guy says that something had changed with an Apple update, and so it was chipmunk voice and cutting in and out. And so today, I was just going to re-record it, but I sort of rethought it, and I want to take it in a new direction a little bit. And so I'm going to re-record it in offline, and I'll play it. I'll put it out as a podcast, hopefully this weekend. And it's on Red, and it's on the horizontal evolution of Red. And I used as the example General Butt Naked is. So if you saw that, that's what I'm talking about. So today I actually want to share actually a couple things. One is I want to share this screen. And that means I do full. There we go. Yeah, great. So now we're going to share desktop 2. And I want to point out a show that they're doing over on Integral Live, or over on Integral Life. This is the live feed for Integral Life, of course. And it's a show that they call The Ken Show. It's Corey DeVos, the editor-in-chief of Integral Life, and Ken Wilber. And Corey gets Ken to talk about all kinds of things, theoretical, cultural, and it's wonderful. As somebody who sat with Ken for 3 years, working with the Integral Institute and saw people come and visit and, spent a lot of time with Ken, his brilliance, just in a conversational way, is just delicious. I drank it up. I had great receptors for it. I still do. And so it's wonderful to see him talking about, things and sort of, the, culture and consciousness. And so anyway, they do it once a month. This is a look at one of them. The one they do them live, and they're doing one this Saturday live. And it is on the varieties of spiritual experience. It's Saturday, 3 to 4 Mountain Time. The politics of consciousness. Corey sent me a text here to read. Neoliberalization of consciousness and human potential. Legalizing mushrooms and the microdosing culture. Subtle energy magic. The nature of evil. Integral embodiment. So, these are interesting topics, and Ken is, nobody does it like Ken. So I encourage you to check it out. In order to get into the archives, you have to be a member of Integral Life. So I'm going to give them a plug. Monthly, $1 for 30 days if you want to try it out. And then other than that, it's $100 a year, I think, which comes down to $825 a month. So you can see that there. And I really encourage you to become a member of Integral Life. It's worth it. Okay, so that's that. Now I want to take this off and I want to put this up. I'm going to share one of my listeners' favorites that I did well over a year ago. It's a conversation with Byron Belitzos about the Urantia book. And it is, I think the title I used for it was A Spiritual Vision with Evolution at its Core. And I didn't expect it to have such an impact with my listeners and actually with me. And I'll describe some of that as I talk to Byron here. And I wanted to say also that, that it was done so long ago that I have a much smaller audience then, so maybe you're hearing this for the first time. And if not, it's an encore, and I hope you enjoy it. I also wanted to say that next week is the last week I'll be doing the live feed until September. I'm taking the summer off and working on my garden. And I'll be posting some stuff too, but not the regular live thing. All right, so that is good. And now I'm going to share my conversation with Byron Belitzos about the Urantia revelation. Okay, so let me do this, that. And today I want to go a little bit far out. And I want to take us all on a journey to a new land called Urantia, which is actually the name of our own home planet Earth, according to our guest today. And I'm eager to get in a good conversation with him. But this world, this Urantia, is a world that is alive with divine love and revelation and intelligence and a realization of the updraft to goodness, truth, and beauty. And the people in this land realize that they are evolving beings in an evolving cosmos, and that the cosmos itself is teeming with life, that there's all levels of celestial beings, angels of all sorts, and extraterrestrial. And that another big realization in this land is that there is a deeply personal part of us, a soul
sharing my
that is evolving through lifetimes. And for some of us, it's our first rodeo. But for most of us, we have a life that precedes this, or an identity, and one that survives this life. And I love this part. The purpose of our life is to grow. We're here to grow and to do our part in the greater process of perfecting the universe. And I love that expression. And, when I talk about the sacred world to come on the webcast a lot, it feels like it would be something like this. And this is, at least part of the essential vision of the Urantia book, which is a book, a spiritual revelation that I've run into over the years. It arose in the early 20th century out of Chicago, and there's some sort of mysterious origins, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I've had a couple encounters with it where I've read deeply in parts of it. I have a friend who's a very, very powerful sort of transmitter, and he's really into it. And I must say, I have been drawn to it. It has a clear evolutionary view, and it appeals to me. And, I get a little bit sort of lost with all the cosmology and all of the details, and it sort of throws me off, and my modernist kicks in. I don't rule this stuff out, but I can't rule it in either. And so that's where I've never really pursued a relationship with the Urantia teachings, and I don't really understand it deeply. But my guest today does. And so I'd like to introduce him. It's Byron Belitzos, and Byron Belitzos. And Byron is the author of Your Evolving Soul, The Cosmic Spirituality of the Urantia Revelation, which is just published in 2017. And Byron is an integralist. And he, in fact, was an inaugural member of Ken Wilber's Integral Institute back in the late 90s, in the turn of this century. And he has advanced training in philosophy, theology, psychology, history. He's a practicing Christian. He has a lot of training in Zen and Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And a very cool guy, very smart. And he's into the Urantia book and the Urantia teachings. So I want to welcome Byron Belitzos. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's just such a thrill to be with you, and I've enjoyed our discussions, and I'm sure I'm going to really enjoy this one.
Yeah, me too. First of all, speaking of that, Byron and I did a talk a few weeks ago that I'm also going to post. It's an audio, and we get into probably more detail than we will here today. But today, I guess since we're the integral ghetto here, let's just start with that, Byron. And you make the case that the Urantia teachings are the most integral spiritual revelation that exists. And so maybe just start there and make that case.
Well, there's not too much competition for an integral revelation, but I was led to Wilber because of the Urantia book. So I was looking for, wow, this thing is so incredibly interesting philosophically. Well, who else is saying anything like this? So I went through Hegel for a long time. I was a student of Hegel in graduate level student, and Whitehead, Aurobindo. Then I got to Wilber, and they were assigning Wilber's first book when I was in graduate school in 1980. And then I thought, oh, this guy's in this direction, because I was reading the Urantia book secretly. Because much of this time I've had to be secretive about it because it's so controversial. But
let me just point out, we don't burn you at the stake anymore.
Yeah,
but it's still you do pay a price.
You do pay a price, and in graduate study, for example, I was I was chastised, really. Don't do your dissertation on this thing. We don't know what it is, and we don't want to do it, you know.
Right.
But aside from that, you know, this is a very tolerant, you know, meme that we're part of. So you can put this up, particularly out here in Northern California. Everybody's into anything. But what happened to me was I found Wilber's Sex, Ecology, Spirituality in the 90s and put up a website kind of comparing Urantia with Ken's work.
Wow.
Particularly after this sense, was it The Marriage of Sense and Soul, was really sounds like the Urantia book. It's like, did this guy copy this out of the, so I did this, and Ken found my website. He found me through Bert Parley.
Uh-huh.
And contacted me and said, wow, this is interesting. Thank you for, you know, covering my work. Would you like to visit with me? So I visited with Ken. So that was way back 99 or something. Ever since then, I've been working with the two bodies of writing together, and they complement each other and supplement each other in beautiful ways.
Yeah, I think that's true. And so let's go back to where you're first taken up by this, because, you know, this is a spiritual teaching. This is a spiritual transmission, and, you know, it landed with you, right? And you're, meanwhile, a graduate student in philosophy, but you've got this heart beating here with Urantia. So how'd that happen?
It was kind of quirky. I was actually in college in Chicago, at the University of Chicago, as a student of history of ideas. And I'd gone through a period of Marxism, and then from Marx to Hegel. And Hegel, I liked it. I don't know, most people thought it was pretty heady, but I thought it was a beautiful evolutionary philosophy, but also had a Christian theology at the heart of it, which is much different than traditional, but it's deep and it's integral. And
now, had you been raised Christian?
I had been raised Greek Orthodox.
Okay.
So there are folks known for systematic theology and for Trinitarian theology. So with Hegel, it was very similar and deep like that. And then suddenly I heard about the Urantia book because it had a big vogue in the early 70s in a lot of circles, sort of hipster circles. And we found out like Jimi Hendrix was reading it, and Bob Dylan knew about it, and Santana was, you know, giving it to his friends. And I found out later that the Haight-Ashbury was all over the place and people knew about it. And so it was like a hipster kind of thing. So I thought, well, this is cool. I have to read this. But it was overwhelming, and it happened. I was in Chicago as a student, and it's based in Chicago. So I met the core Urantia people there, and I thought they'd be, you know, with white robes and like sort of floating around the room, but they were just real down to earth, regular folks.
Yeah, and some very cool folks. I mean, Mo Siegel here, founder of Celestial Seasonings, is big into the Urantia book and the Jesusonian Institute and so forth. And so you meet these people in Chicago.
Yeah, then I get around. I met Mo back in those days, and like, wow, Mo's, you know. So I realized that this has got a lot of bright people involved who are older, you know, thinkers, and I plunged in and became a student, but with some trepidation because it makes claims. Big claims and need big evidence.
Right. Yeah.
So I've been looking for that evidence ever since, because I was taken emotionally and spiritually. And I found sort of the philosophic and scientific supporting evidence for the fact that this is a special, what we call an epical revelation.
Well, okay, fair enough. And before we get into that, what is the revelation? How would you put it, particularly to those of us who have an integral spirituality where we already get that sort of updraft of evolution, and we may not go for the whole 9 yards of the Urantia revelation, but what could we learn from it?
I'd say right at the top, and just what you said at the top of the show, is that it's a love-saturated universe, meaning it's not just stars and galaxies. It's actually populated by deities who are loving deities and angels and other civilizations. And it actually says there are trillions of inhabited worlds that are inhabited with humanoid beings. And the whole point of evolution is moving toward love and toward perfection. So through love, one gets to perfection. So this is really like a Christian sounding teaching.
Mm-hmm.
God as love, as a loving personality, divine personality. And so the core teaching may be you're placed here to grow a soul and grow into the afterlife, into an eternal life, which sounds like the gospel in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here, the higher beings are here to support your growth into eternity. I mean, that makes you feel pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That you have an eternal life and that it's all about love and friendship.
Yeah.
And service.
Right.
And personal growth, and there's support systems for that.
Yeah. So why is it so ugly?
The Urantia book is important for those looking at the nature of evil. Extremely important and not well understood what it says about that. But it gives you a prehistory, showing that in our early history, pre-Sumerian history, something went very wrong on our planet. A very rare happenstance. I don't know if you know this part, Jeff. That's called the Lucifer Rebellion. So on a normal planet, the angelic host of the planet. So each planet is populated, grows from single cells to humanoid beings. But it's populated with angels who they're hosting you, so to speak. So the angelic host of the planet went to the dark side. It sounds like Star Wars or something, but they went dark, and this happens very, very rarely. There was a rebellion, and was spoken about in Milton's Paradise Lost and things like that. So this satanic kind of rebellion, led by Lucifer. So it sounds like myth, but it spells this out in such a way that sounds like authentic history to me. And the evidence for that we see in front of us. Because it's not typical for a planet to have atrocities, to have genocide, to have holocausts, to have nuclear warfare. That is totally atypical for an inhabited planet. But in 1 in a million planets, we'll have this default, they call it, in which the angels hosting the planet go dark, although some of the angels did not. So there was a split and a kind of war in heaven, so to speak. So this war in heaven, the balance was tipped only when Christ came to the planet. And that was really the termination of the Lucifer rebellion.
See, all of this seems so mythic to me. And it's just, I mean, it's just these stories of the rebellion. First of all, let me just ascertain, you don't have to believe all this to still get the juice, do you? I mean,
I'd say this is...
I mean, here's what I want as an integral practitioner. I want to open up to the personal aspect of the universe. Because I grew up with the Christian thing. I have the Buddhist thing where we sort of deconstruct all that and we go into emptiness. And I like the idea that the ultimate nature of reality has a deeply, drippingly meaningful personal aspect, and that there's a Jeffness that survives this life, and that I am here to grow, and I'm evolving, all that stuff. And even I'm good with beings that are communicating with me. I'm just sort of like opening to that. Why would I rule that out? Why would we rule out that there are billions of inhabited worlds? I mean, that would be silly. So I'm good with that. So can I work with that without believing in the Lucifer rebellion?
Yeah, of course, you can pick and choose anything. It hangs together.
Well, in Christianity, you kind of can't. You gotta go for the whole thing, or you get burned in hell. So,
well, yeah, that's a really pretty.
Yeah, fair enough.
Liberal Christian.
Urantia is beyond that.
Certainly beyond any modern. It's
right.
Postmodern.
Yeah.
Do things and
I actually, just for another little insert here, I do find it kind of even though I have a sort of modern antibodies to it, the idea that that the universe, that we made a mistake, that there's something aberrant about Earth, that we went through this, and actually everybody doesn't have to, because it is mighty ugly. I mean, and
It's a very
Now, I have other explanations for how that works that actually are sort of Christian in the sense that once we realize this world is not our home and suffering is meant to wake us up, and there, we can find meaning in suffering that way, and that even the little girl who's raped can at some point learn to, in some afterlife. I heard this from this archbishop, and I thought it was kind of sweet, in that she can learn to forgive her attacker, that she can grow that big, and that's the point of all of that. So there's that explanation for suffering without it being a sort of a mythic rebellion and all that. I don't know.
Yeah, let's just stick with that, because really,
Fair enough.
There's adversity in evolution. I don't care what planet you're
There
from.
you go. Thank you. Yeah.
And you have to struggle to learn to speak, to walk, to think,
Yes.
to
Right.
live and love.
Right.
So it's in the adversity that the soul is made, right?
Yeah.
So that's really the point. And so what do we mean by soul making? And it's especially poignant on our planet, so-called Urantia, because we've had so much adversity on the planet-wide. So that what's really great about our planet is that, and a great privilege to be here, is that in the face of adversity, you have all these tools that you're endowed with. And so the nature of the self is such that it can handle anything if you deploy those spiritual assets that you have that are just given. And you don't know that you have them. So you need to be told. So you need a religion to tell you, that you need, Hinduism to say there's this Atman, and this is from Brahman, and it's got everything in it, and it's infinite. So that resource, the Urantia book is telling you that, but in a postmodern context. So it's the same teaching, but it's nice to have it in a way, a teaching that has a philosophic integral view that you don't
Right.
have to pose on it, which we do, like with Ken Wilber's Fourth Turning of Buddhism.
Right.
He's rewriting Buddhism, and it's beautiful. It's great.
Right.
And kind of rewriting it, integral Christianity now. We got a lot of writing, but it's already built in the Urantia book. It's already an integral Christianity.
Right.
So, but it's much more built out. Its architecture is much bigger than integral Christianity as inspired by Ken.
All right. So, yeah, fair enough. I mean, I want to know about how it's built out. I also want to know about your particular experience, and particularly with cosmic beings. And is there any the thing you want to share about that, and how does that help us, integral, promiscuous spiritual practitioners who, I always love Ram Dass. He says, take the teachings and run. So, I want to know what's your experience? How do we develop that? What's going on?
Well, the first part of your question about, so filling in this big architecture.
Yeah.
Who are these beings that are out there, right? So
Yes. Thank
now
you.
we have, people bombarding us with these channeled things and from these beings or these extraterrestrials. Like, where are they from? You hear these names of these planets. It's just so inchoate, really, truly. And as a publisher for 22 years, I've been pitched all these crazy things channeled by, but the Urantia book says, well, you can't know this because you're a mortal living on a planet, but we're out here and we're going to tell you what's out here, and there's no way you can notice unless it's revealed to you. So here's the architecture of the bigger cosmos, which is, making you more cosmocentric. But if you had off-planet beings telling you this, and if you believed it, then you would have a bigger. So this is telling you there are billions, actually trillions of inhabited planets, that they're galaxy clusters that are fully inhabited, and other galaxy clusters that are not inhabited. And there's a central core of galaxies that are inhabited, but it's a very small portion. The rest are uninhabited, will be inhabited. And it's got a governance to it. The universe has governance. And the governance is handled by administrative type angels. But there's also a ministering angels aspect. So they're angels that minister directly to humans lovingly. But there's other beings that are holding the space for the whole universe, including the ascension, what we call the ascension.
Oh,
What happens in the afterlife. So right now we have this like really flat Earth view of the afterlife. It's like, okay, you go up there and you, I don't know, then you reincarnate quickly or something. And maybe you get from Hinduism, there's one part of Hinduism, really the Hare Krishnas, to say there's higher worlds you go to, but it's very mythic sounding. But this is a description of these worlds as ordinary places. You get a little bit of that in Steiner too, and here and there, but it's in Steiner, it's kind of really offbeat and weird. The Rancher book is very straightforward. There are these higher planets, and here's what you're going to do there. This is what you're.
And clearly there's some, means of transport, communication, or all oneness, or just, these are different dimensions, or what?
They're just gradations, you might say, so in the immediate afterlife, you have a body that looks like you, but it's a higher, more refined energetically, the body itself. And it's still you with your unique personhood. And you're always going to be your unique self, but you're going to grow into living from that selfhood slowly as your soul evolves. The soul slowly evolves to perfection. And when it does, it fuses with the self, with the inherent intrinsic unique self and the spirit endowment of the self. So backing up a little bit, the three endowments of the self and sort of the design of the self is, and we're not talking about the body mind, that's just what's growing as sort of from animal origin body. Mm-hmm. But the metaphysical parts of the self are the evolving soul, which is the only part that we personally have control over, and that we co-create in partnership with the endowment of the Buddha nature, if you want. The Atman, the spirit self, which is not the person, not the personhood. It's impersonal, but it's a highly, highly, highly refined fragment. It's a fragment of deity.
Is that an individual fragment that stays Jeff, or is Jeff, or is it impersonal in the sense that it's same one for everybody?
One for everybody, but it's modular.
Okay.
So you're given this provisional spirit self that's not mm-hmm. your identity.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In addition, you're given the unique personhood, mm-hmm. which is distinct. So my book is written to show, here's what Aristotle said about that. Here's what Plato said about that. Here's what Hegel said about. Here's what Descartes said about these ideas. Mm-hmm. No one really quite got it, except a few. Like Steiner really kind of has the same architecture, mm-hmm. and Hegel sort of does, and Whitehead sort of. But this is much more precise architecture. So again, let me make this distinction clear: that the Mark Gaffney style unique self is very close to what the Urantia book, and I've communicated with Mark about this, he knows this, is very close to this notion of a God-given identity which has very peculiar characteristics that are you, and that in all future time, your signature is knowable because mm-hmm. it's very unique to you. Mm-hmm. There's something about personhood that even you see somebody 50 years later, you're like, oh yeah, I remember you,
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah.
And that's different from the Buddha nature, from mm-hmm. the impersonal. So yes. all these parts of the self. So the higher two are existential; they're non-evolutional, and the part that's evolving is the soul, which is evolving as the material mind evolves and makes better decisions. So the soul captures your best experience, not so much best, but most poignant experiences. So it can be bad experiences. Mm-hmm. So it's just what's important for making your character what it is today. There's something taking a snapshot of each of these events, and they're all throughout the day. Those are stored in and as the soul, so that is evolutional. Mm-hmm. So the spirit self is not evolving and is modular. It's on loan to you. And if you choose, you can fuse with it. So this is what we might call enlightenment, but it's really post-enlightenment. So enlightenment is you're dwelling in this inner light, and that's recognizable. But here we're talking about fusing with it.
Mm.
If you were to fuse with it,
Mm-hmm.
you would combust. You would have a rainbow body phenomenon. You would leave the body. And so in advanced planets, like everybody's running around like they're Aurobindo or something. They're so advanced that they don't die. They fuse, and they go up in light, and they disappear. And that's what happens at cemeteries. They actually have these arenas where, okay, I'm ready. 400 years old now, and I'm ready to fuse. But most, for us, less advanced, our fusion happens in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to become a Buddha, and unless you choose to not go on, then you have that option.
And what happens then?
You ask to be snuffed out, so to speak. Sounds harsh.
No. I'm going to Buddha.
But you're going to go to Buddha. But if you were Hitler, according to the Rancha book, you would survive. After death, you would wake up in a resurrection chamber, and these angels would be present. They would say, "Look, you've survived death. So you're here with us, and you're Hitler, and this is your life." And so they've reconstructed the self with a new body, a higher, more refined. And then they said, this is what's in your soul, Mr. Adolf Hitler, death of millions of people, and this is in your soul, and you need to kind of work through that and heal that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to do that? Because we have a really great curriculum for you. And they do a life review. And I have first chapter of my book, Your Evolving Soul. I talk about life review and near-death experience, which is exactly what the Rancha book is saying. They're going to show you your whole life because it's stored up in you in your hard drive of your soul. Mm-hmm. And you're Adolf Hitler. You say, I don't really want to fix that. It's beyond hope. And they say, no. We love, universe loves you. We forgive you. You're forgiven. He said, I can't accept it. I couldn't accept this forgiveness. And so they say you have an option to opt out.
Wow.
So the soul that he developed, so the soul is conserved. But the personhood that was attached to it is removed, like surgically removed, and the soul continues on. And it becomes a possession of deity. So there's a record of everything, even the most dark things. And that's an evolutional view of the cosmos, that everything that happens is recorded and is...
It makes perfect sense in its own way, in terms of how we would expect this thing to, evolve, because evolution means not just better of the same, it's a whole new thing. The next stage of evolution is not really predictable from the current one. So I'm good with that. To sort of just bring it down to how we could light up our life with this. So you're talking about everything we do has meaning, right? And it sort of gets recorded. And our job here is to perfect the universe through perfecting our own souls. So that's sort of our daily guidance, right? I mean, that's our orienting spiritual guidance, right? Yes. And then, so I love that. That's good. And then we get help from these other beings. So do you get help from other beings?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that most of it's unconscious, right? So, but in a more advanced situation, you may have the ability to contact these other beings. But it's really, I think, secondary to the fact that it's a friendly universe.
Thank you.
It's friendly, and so it's friendly to evolution. So it's friendly to your evolution, and whatever tools that are available that you would listen to, they will approach you. And this gets me into something, if I may, into where there's a difference with integral theory.
Cool.
Or integral theology, if you will. So, because for the most part, we grew up in integral theory with a more of a monistic, unitary view of spirit. And I think that Ken gets this from Plotinus. And he gets it from Buddhism as well, and Vedanta. So non-duality, is at the core here. But here it's a little different because we think of deity in the Rancha book more like a Christian deity, and that there's a relational deity. relational deity, being that it's not just the one God or the one spirit or the one monad or whatever you want to call it, but it's in relationship to co-equal beings. And if it weren't, then it wouldn't really be, in my view, a loving relational God, because if God doesn't have equal partners, it's really not a communitarian view of deity. It's a deity that's above all of us, sort of like Allah in Islam. It's just there's the merciful Allah and then everybody else, and it's in a kind of authoritarian relationship. But in the Urantia book, the deities are in a community of 3 and 7. But there's the one, but always differentiable into the Trinitarian notion of the Son and the Spirit. But all of them are equal, so it's the paradox of one and many fused in the theology. Yeah. So we get that, and the reason I bring that up is because of our personal growth is related. Because the mission of angels does not emanate from God the Father, from the primal Father. There's actually not a gender attached to this, but it emanates from the Spirit, that is the third person, because the third person is the ultimately relational deity. So it sends out, it actually propagates angels, and that's its ministry, and that's what it really does. But the second person of divinity, its job, or his job, her job, is incarnations. Why? Because the primal Father doesn't know what it's like to incarnate. The Son does. The Son differentiates from the Father and knows what it's like to be to have a parent.
So the Father is basically outside of time and space. This is I think of Tibetan Buddhism has this idea of just they talk about it being a cervix of just where everything's blowing out of, everything's coming out of it. But it's outside of time and space, right?
It's utterly outside of time and space.
But still has a personal quality.
It has a personal quality in the sense that it couldn't be any less than personal.
Well, thank you.
Yes, because it's much more than personal.
Because personal is not reducible to impersonal.
Yes, they're like side by side with one another.
Yeah, fair enough. Steve McIntosh talks about them being, sort of an ultimate reality, being a polarity between the personal and impersonal, and that out of that polarity arises the whole shebang.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly right. And there are actually other elements that you mentioned, but those are two. The core of it is the impersonal. Is really a lot of the religions have focused on the impersonal, and Buddhism, and maybe in particular, original Buddhism at least.
Well, and a lot of integralists, a lot of green, we still have antibodies to our personal mythical, religions that we grew up with. And so we go to Buddhism and we sort of wring some of that out of the system and, develop this impersonal view. But we don't want to let that get reified either, because for me, bringing back the personal, oh my God.
There you go.
You'll pardon the expression.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
Well, I think you really light up from that. And I think that's evidence that we want to, and we are persons in a personal universe with love as at the heart of it.
Yeah.
You light up and you think, oh, well, you mean the universe is friendly, it is loving. And that meaning it's not just an abstraction, but they're loving beings. So at the heart of this is outside of space and time, as you were saying. It's outside of space and time. It's non-evolutional deity, all love, but it's personal. But they're beyond personal as well.
Right.
But if this is the creator, and that's the proposition, the creator can't be less than the creature. So the creator would have to have eyes to hear and ear. It says in the Bible, it has to be able to relate to its creature. So that would mean it would be personal in that respect. But it's infinitely transcends the personal. And this is also, it's not a huge revelation. It's in Christian theology as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Christian theology doesn't have this notion. So, for example, that the second person of the Trinity sponsors incarnations, avatars. That's its ministry. So they're trying to reach you through angels. And if that don't work, they'll send an avatar. That's sent from the second person. And the avatar is Krishna, for example. That's a mythic version.
Mm-hmm.
But Christ, according to Urantia book, was not a myth. Was sent from the central domains outside of space-time to represent the divine personal love of God in that fashion. Well, we killed him, but they have other ways to do it, right? So the Father, the primal first source and center, they call the Father, sends a tool also, and that's the indwelling spirit, which is a gift from God. Where does the Buddha nature come from? We don't know. And it sends two endowments: the personality, unique self, and this personal, not personal, but impersonal divine spirit. So that's a lot of gifting.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got it from within, you got it from without. You have angels coming in, and then you have an avatar that incarnates.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly the avatar would come at a very pregnant time when people are looking. So in the time of Christ, there was a search for a Messiah, not just among the Jews either. It was like the whole Mediterranean was alive with what is going to be revealed. There was the Gnostic current was huge. So, and this is a time as well, we think, that there will be another avatar, but that's a whole other subject. But in any case, this is the personal growth aspect of this is divided into three domains. And so it helps you to articulate.
Okay.
This is the ministry. This is how I'm being loved by God, God's mother side through angels. And this is how I'm being loved by God as son, as derivative, through an avatar. And this is how I'm being loved by the primal Father from within, a miraculous endowment. And so, how is that compatible with integral theory? My book will tell you. but
it's kind of first, second, and third person, right?
It is. Yeah. It truly is. But it's somewhat, that's kind of a tip of the hat to a trinity.
Yeah.
That Ken makes, but it lacks in philosophic depth. I hate to say, compared to the Trinity in the Urantia book, or in academic Christian theology, is much more depth.
But still, it in terms of the how it actually helps us to develop a spiritual practice, the idea that there's this indwelling spirit. I mean, that is a dimension of my spiritual practice that I don't want to miss. That there is somebody who sees me and loves me and knows my Jeffness and cares about me and is willing to, relate to me. I don't know who that is, but I'm working on sort of relating to him, her, anyway. And then also just the manifest reality of this universe. Oh my God, as a third person. Those are, you could do worse than keep those balls in the air.
Those are really great. They're important to have the 1, 2, 3 view. Also, of course, Ken exalts the truth, beauty, goodness triad. And the Urantia book mentions it like 85 times. And so the growth of the soul is really indexed, you might say, to your truth, beauty, and goodness experiences. So if you cultivate those, you're growing the soul. If you do it consciously, you're really growing the soul. And I pointed this out to Ken about the truth, beauty, goodness part of the Urantia book, and I gave him a copy. This was back in 1999. He was flipping through it really fast, and it was amazing to watch him take in a book. When you see him up close, it's something to see.
I know, it is. It's amazing.
Like eating it.
Yeah.
So he was going through it, and he said, well, I read this when I was 17, the Urantia book. He read everything when he was 17.
Of course he did, yeah.
The last time I saw him, he was much more inquisitive about it.
Uh-huh. And this was just last year, right?
Yeah, last July when I went to see
when you were out with your book, right?
I was out touring with my book. I was in Denver.
Yeah.
So Ken said, come see me and the book and talk to me about it.
Well, it's really great to have you in the integral fold, because you bring this piece of the puzzle. And, I have such, antibodies to anything that feels mythic. not that I don't want to see it as beautiful in an art form, and there's all kinds of, ways of looking at it that way. But to have a guy who's really smart, who's been around the block and knows what he's talking about, and you're all in on this, even that alone sort of expands my bubble a little bit, because I think, how could he do that? But there you are. So anyway, Byron Belitzos, thank you so much for being with us today. And if people are interested in more, your book again is Your Evolving Soul.
Yeah, you asked me to flash it on the screen.
Yes, please. Yeah, there it is. A Cosmic Spirituality of the Urantia Revelation, Byron Belitzos. And you have a website.
The site is evolving-souls.org.
Great.
So sign up, because I have a lot of things going out soon. I have Sean Esbjorn Hargens I'm interviewing about all of this. And I just interviewed Dustin DePerna about it. And I think that Ken Wilber is going to come on my little show too. And so, because he can't say no. But
yeah.
I'd love to have integralists commenting on my work. And especially, there's a couple of chapters that talk about Wilber's work, integral theory, and I'd love to see what people say about it. So,
right on.
To meet me through my website and my book.
And again, the website is evolving-souls, plural, .org. Okay. And, and come back and visit us again. There's so much to talk about.
Love to do it, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Byron.
God bless you. Bye-bye now.
Bye, folks.